So someday, sons and daughters will rise up and fight while we stood still. Can you hear me? Can you hear me running? Can you hear me running? Oh, my calling you.
Hello, welcome to Inform New Hampshire. I'm Rich Merritt, your host. Our guest today is Greg Fedor. If I pronounced that correctly, I probably murdered it.
Fedor.
Fedor. We're going to be talking about the family court system, a lot of people's favorite subject. But first, I'd like to point out again that Jerry DeLemus is still in prison, over 2.5 years and counting, probably 2 3/4, for something he never did. He stood up for his rights and the rights of other Americans, and he's doing time for that. That's his crime. And speaking of crimes, we'll get into that in a second. Keep him in your prayers and your thoughts. Hopefully, God will have mercy on him and get him out soon. Secondarily, I'd like to ask you to please go to the nationallibertyalliance.org and help them provide these books to the sheriffs. Any tool that we can use to free up America is beneficial in our mind, okay? Getting those books to the sheriffs, and hopefully they'll read them. Maybe they won't. Maybe a deputy will read them and he'll run for sheriff next year or something. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in life, but you try to do the best you can with the tools you have. The book that they have, they want to send 20 copies to 3,133 counties across this country. I think it's a worthwhile cause. They need money to do it, though. With that, please help them. And if you don't have any money and you can't provide that, maybe you can provide some time for research or whatnot. Give them a call, sign up as a member. Actually, don't give them a call because their number's buried in their website. But sign up as a member on the website and do what you can for them. Get involved. There's a weekly phone number on Monday nights. The educational tools they have are outstanding. So take advantage of it and help us get our country back. One of the things that I've been wanting to do for a long time and finally do it is invite some people on. And I invited a couple other guests. One had a housing crisis, and I'm not sure what it was. I didn't get all the information, but Heather Donovan was supposed to be with us today, and her daughter left school with an emergency situation, and I sincerely hope that her daughter's well and everything turns out all right, but she couldn't attend either. One of the things that we're talking about today is the crime, and these are my words I'm using, the crimes that are being committed in the courts by the judges, by the lawyers, by the bar. They're all guilty of it. They're all guilty of treason through sedition or whatever you want to call it. I wanted to have Greg talk about, first and foremost, some of the avenues that they use to get money. And that's basically what the family court or any of the courts are about. It's a bank to extract money from the people. There is no justice in America. And if you listen to what Greg has to say today and some future guests, Greg will be back. I already discussed it with him to talk about his particular situation. You'll find out that it's egregious. It's ridiculous what's going on in this country. So with that, I'll turn it over to Greg. And if you want to just start, Greg, by talking about, I don't know if you want to talk about the adoption situation, the guardian at litem, or whatever the hell that's called. I don't know.
Right. No, thank you, Richie. Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios, situations where families and children are being trafficked, and there's multiple facets the way they do that. Number one route is through divorce. That's usually where it starts because you got two sides that are arguing over property division and, of course, parental rights, responsibilities, and that so forth. That involves a lot of times children protective services, or in New Hampshire they call it Division Youth, Child, Youth, and Family. They also add guardian ad litems to this situation. Then you have judges, attorneys, and then, finally, if all these situations fester and they continue to get worse, you eventually get adoption agencies involved because they pick on vulnerable individuals, vulnerable children, And you're most vulnerable when you're going through a divorce, mentally, spiritually, physically, job-wise. You're in a bind. You're in a bad situation.
Just so you know, Greg, I'm not laughing at you.
Yeah.
I'm laughing with you. I went through a divorce 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a space odyssey. It was. But I can relate to what you're saying. It's kind of a traumatic time. And by the way, the divorce I had was a non-contestable divorce. Thank God my wife wanted to go that route because
Yep.
I don't want to involve lawyers. So, no, all they do is, and I told my wife, excuse me for interrupting, but I told my wife, I said, we can go through this big, long divorce. You can get an attorney and I'll get an attorney. Ultimately, I'm going to be paying for both because you don't work. So by the time we get through, the money that you would have had, they're going to take.
Oh,
So how do you want to do this? And I said, if you do this, we'll keep the house and we'll do this and we'll do that. And when the kids are old enough and they leave, we'll sell the house, split the proceeds, all that stuff. She finally did it. And she come out of it pretty good. I mean, after the divorce, she got a check for $70,000, which wasn't too bad. Tax-free money.
right. Well, no, that's exactly right. If families would sit together, divorce is a tough time. You went through it. I've went through it. Many people have gone through it. But this is the opportune time for Child Protective Services to come in, guardian ad litems, attorneys, judges, like I said, CPS, Child Protective Service. All of them are involved in your case at that point in time because they look at you as a vulnerable individual.
I bet you didn't know that all those people care about your kids.
Yeah, they care about your kids in so much that how much money they can profit from that scenario. Not so much about the children's welfare because in reality, I don't want to talk too much about my personal situation, but I can tell you from experience and seeing other individuals that have gone through it, the guardian ad litems in particular in New Hampshire are the most vehement and biggest vehicle to steal children, to traffic children, and they have all your information. They know where you work, they know how much money you make, how much you have in retirement, where you live. They have all this information, and then they can compute that information, and they can figure out how's the best way to make money. A lot of times what they do is they'll take the children from loving, caring parents that have the means, good jobs, good housing, and they transfer those to the other individual who doesn't have the means. And by doing so, they can create a scenario where they can take more money from the individual that has those means, because the individual has those means is going to continue to fight and strive to make sure their children's health and welfare is good, where the other parent doesn't have those means to do such.
It's quality of life.
Right, exactly. So your children's quality of life is being drained by these services that are supposed to be protecting your children, helping your children, and ensuring their safety. But in reality, that's not what their goal is. Their goal is to generate as much profit for the courts, for themselves, as they can possibly do. And lawyers, on top of that, of course, their lawyer's number one goal isn't your winning a lawsuit or winning your case. Their number one goal is to gain as much money out of the situation as they can. And that's where families are suffering, because by the time you've gone through 6, 7, 10, 15 years of these proceedings with your children, you have nothing. And like you were saying, dealing with your ex-wife, do you want for the best for your children or best for your personal situation? You come together as a group and a family and say, hey, we have these differences. We didn't work as a unit, but we can work separately but together to help our children. And a lot of times these services are putting families against each other, intentionally so. And then if the situation gets bad enough, then neither parent gets those kids. Then those children get shipped off to adoption agencies, where they are then used for more money service, because every time a child is changes hands, the parental responsibility changes hands, the courts get money for that. The protection agencies get money for that. The adoption agencies get money for that. So your children are being used as leverage to gain profit for each individual agency. Even the school district is involved in these things, because a lot of times your kids are coded with certain disabilities, or not necessarily always disabilities, but problems that the child may have.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem, in that they're all working together to make those situations make money for themselves.
Well, I wanted to just point out, Greg, that, and I'm sure you know this anyway, but for the viewers maybe, I said I gave my wife $70,000 when we got divorced. If the situation were different and she didn't want to do a non-contestable divorce, what she would have done is got her lawyer. I would have got my lawyer, or maybe I wouldn't have got my lawyer. But back then I didn't know any better. At the end of it all, she wouldn't have got a check for $70,000. Those two lawyers would have got the check for $70,000, not just for the $70,000 she got, but that $70,000 I got. So they would have made $150,000. You tell me, are the lawyers looking out for your children? I don't think so. I don't care about money. I need it just like everybody else does, don't get me wrong. But what I mean by that is, what's more important is that my children, and I can speak for Greg because I know Greg, we're not close personal friends, but I know him well enough. On a few occasions, he's worn his heart on his sleeve, and I can tell he loves his children dearly, just like I do. And I want what's best for my kids. Some lawyer who doesn't know my children, stay away from me. Put your talons back.
All right.
Well, you must have heard that, you know what 1,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean is? A good start.
That's interesting, because that's the truth, honestly, is what he was saying. You can look at this situation. I don't care about money. I just need enough to live. That's all I want. My biggest goal is that my children are successful and that they have the great things that they need, as all parents would. And when you involve the attorneys, when you involve CPS, the judges, all this, it takes away from the children's futures. It takes away from what they are set to achieve. Because every time you go into that courtroom, somebody's losing money. Most likely,
Not
both
somebody,
of you.
You. Yeah.
Your children. And that's what it should be about.
Well, you're losing money, and your children are being deprived of a better quality of life.
Yeah,
like we talked
absolutely.
about,
The quality of life is so huge. So before you involve all these agencies, you have to think long and hard about what the right choice is for your children. And unless there's extreme cases, most of the time you're not wise to involve these services that aren't really services, because they're really for-profit industries. And that's the problem here. If you were to take the money out of these situations and you would actually put the children at the forefront of these agencies, then you would see changes. Then you would see actual children that are thriving through a tough time. Like I said, divorce is a tough time for everyone involved. And you would see greater ability for those children to grow and become upstanding citizens. Exactly. I believe that a lot of the problems that you're seeing in New Hampshire and across the country with drugs and abuse of drugs is because of scenarios and situations that the children are dragged through in these tough times. Your tough economic times in the past, and then you add in the family drama, and then these children don't get the actual services and love that they need, and then they grow up and they wonder how this happened to them, and then they become involved in scenarios where they don't have a parent that really is there for them, and then they get involved in these scenes in situations where drugs are involved. And then their life spirals out of control, and guess what? They're back into the same system that their family started them in the first place.
Yeah, because they're back into the same system, Greg, because it's a cash cow for the lawyers and the judges. They both make money off of this deal. The judges do too.
Exactly.
They get kickbacks.
Oh, absolutely. Well, anybody that really looks into the situation, your child support, New Hampshire, latest statistic I have, for every dollar of child support that's given, New Hampshire DHS receives $3.84 up in addition to that dollar. So they're collecting money off of every child support case that they're now those services are supposed to be kicked back into the individual groups, but the judges are the ones that are actually making the profit off of those. So they have in their best interest, their own personal best interest, to take the child and move them into a situation where the parent that doesn't make as much money, like I said, transferring of the wealth, moving, shifting this, so that they gain those profits from that situation. So that's where children are being left in situations where they're not being equally treated by both parents.
Yeah, and the two people, while they're moving people, well, not moving people, moving the children around, the two people that love the children, regardless of the differences that a husband and wife have, they both love the children. That's 99% of the time that's the case. Once in a while you get a wacko, but that's a rarity. It's not common. The mother and father love the children. I sat down with my kids and said, it isn't your fault we're getting a divorce.
Right.
It just didn't work out. Both mommy and me love you, and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's just that type of situation. But the courts drag it on. And I did want to make one point, Greg, before you go on, if I may.
Sure.
I wanted to talk about the correlation between what goes on in the family courts and the drug situation in the state. You've got people dealing the drugs, and all I'm going to say about that is that Mike Gill basically told us all who's dealing the drugs. And since I worked in law enforcement, I know some of what he said is true. I can't verify it all. But more recently, I've found out that the drug treatment centers are owned by some of the drug dealers. So, and I want you to think about this. They're dealing the drugs to cause the problem. The people that get the problem get sent to their drug treatment center. Thank you, Greg. And on top of that, the government sends in money to the treatment center, which is the guy doing selling the drugs, okay, to help the people. So is he helping the people, or is he stuffing money in his pocket? This is what's going on in the family courts also. It's a revolving door. It just keeps going around, and all there is money being extracted from people. And then the thing that I hate most about that, I mean, it's just as bad or worse with the drugs, but small children shouldn't be bartered around like that. They should be loved and nurtured so they can become good adults in our society and not be problematic and get the hell away from the state instead of creating more state agencies. That's not what we need.
No, you're 100% right. And the same basic scheme plan that you're talking about with the drugs, the treatment center, that's exactly the same situation that's happening in family court. It's a revolving door. You keep coming back. You're just circling around. And every time you circle around, it's like going around a rotary, but paying a toll every time you go around the rotary. And so people get involved in family court. You're in this rotary. And every time you pass a road, here's another dollar, another dollar, another dollar, and they're collecting your fees. And in the middle of all this is your children. So their resources are being drained as your family gets stuck in this never-ending rotary where everybody's taking money from you. Their lives are diminished. Their futures are diminished because not only are they losing money, the children are losing money because the parents are losing money, they're also losing time with their parents,
yeah.
Either mother or their father, and that's the most important aspect of anything. Money is important to a point, but the most important is the children spending time, quality time, not just time. Like you can spend 2 hours with your kid, but is that quality time? The quality time is what's the most important, and that's what the family courts are taking away from so many parents is the quality time with their kids, because they don't have the amount of resources to spend that quality time with them.
Exactly. Well, that was my whole point, and you brought it around very good. If the lawyers and the courts, the judges, are all extracting money from you, and all these other people that are involved in this process, they're extracting money from you and your ex, or your wife before your ex, however you want to
Right.
look at it, that gives you less of an opportunity, because you're spending this time in court and on paperwork
Yes.
that you have to do at home, and taking money away, resources away from you that you could use with your children. It's why, I mean, if I had one word to encourage people out there, if you got to go through a divorce, and believe me, I didn't think I'd be one of them, but I'm a statistic. I would encourage everybody, do not go to court. Get a non-contestable divorce. The money stays in your pocket. The time that you can spend with your children is there for you. The courts aren't taking it up, and lawyers aren't taking it up. See to it that your child or children make out the best. The hell with the courts.
Right.
You don't need them. That's just my advice, anyway.
Right. No, there's always blame to go around. People are always going to blame this parent, that parent. Stop the blame game. Start focusing on your kids. Start focusing on what's their best interest, because when you start the blame game, the lawyers, the judges, the CPS, the guardian ad litems, the adoption agencies, they love that fight. They enjoy that fight, so stop the fight.
They're licking their chops, Greg, because they know money's coming their way. When
Yeah, their mouth is watering. They see that fight. They go, great, this is exactly what we want. This is exactly what we want to handle this. We've got one pitting against each other, and the children are left in the middle, and they're suffering because they feel that damage every time that you go back to court. They know. They know you went to court. They know the consequences of going to court. Your children feel that. So stop putting your children in the middle of it and start thinking about their best interests and their best needs. And because these services aren't really services, they're for-profit businesses that are interested in your children for a monetary gain. So think about that and understand where that's coming from. I'm not saying don't fight for what's right, because you have to. And if you have to get an attorney, you do so. And you've got to fight for yourself and your children, you do so. But think of the bigger picture and take on what battles make sense. When something makes sense, fight for it. When it doesn't make sense, realize...
Compromise.
Yes, compromise, exactly. That's exactly right. Compromise, because at the end of the day...
You're doing it for the kids.
Your co-parents, no matter what happens. These services aren't your co-parent. I've seen a lot of things where the government wants to inject themselves as the parent of the children. No, you and your ex, you and your wife, whoever you've had a relationship that you've put the children, that is your co-parent. The government is not your co-parent. Stop involving them if you don't need to.
Yeah, if you look at the situation from a business perspective, you have the courts are a corporation. I don't know if a lot of people even realize that. The state is a corporation. The adoption agency is a corporation. And behind every corporation, everyone is a lawyer. Funny, huh? And then you got the lawyers in the courtroom, and then you got the judges in the courtroom. And personally, I'm not attacking any one lawyer. I'm attacking the bar, because they suck. Okay, putting it mildly, the bar is the devil. They're evil. Okay, British Accreditation Registry, the Crown still has its talons in us. I'm telling you that because these lawyers, some of them got to wake up to the fact that, hey, something ain't right here. If you read your Constitution, I know the Constitution's gone. I'm not even going to get into that. But if you read the Constitution, it's a common law document. Well, where's common law? Where has it been for the past 50 years? Declaration of Independence is a common law document. United States Constitution is a common law document. Magna Carta, all of them. Well, where are they? Where did they go? Stop believing that we have justice in America. We don't. We have corporations running things, and that's the courts.
No, that's an excellent point, and that's something I wanted to bring forward too. Is as a corporation, your number one responsibility is to make money for that corporation. So
Exactly.
let's lay that clear first, and then understand how this happens. You're talking about common law. Well, there is no such thing as common law the way the courts are set up with family court right now, because common understanding and common law is not part of their agenda, because there's so many situations, and the attorneys are all in on this, the judges are all in on this, where they set up a certain set of procedures, rules, and regulations, but in reality, they don't follow those rules, regulations, and procedures themselves. They make up the ones that they wish to follow, and then, if you go in as a pro se or pro per person, you're expected to follow all these rules and regulations, but they don't actually follow all these rules and regulations. So what is common law? What is the actual law? What family court really is corporate law. And in corporate law, you're dealing with a profit, and you're dealing with a situation where how can we make the money, how can we continue this business, okay? And in common law, if you had common law in family courts, you would look at the best interests of the children, what makes sense, what's rational, but that's not what happens in these family courts, because it's not a common law, it's actually corporate law, and your children are the product, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
So as a product, how do you promote the product? How do you gain the most leverage, the most monetary gain out of that?
Let me make a point in that regard, Greg. The 2 minutes left. All right. Very quickly, I'll just say this. The common law has been stolen. It was stolen between the 1960s and the 1970s. A group of us, myself included, have proof of that. We took Governor Christopher Sununu to court to sue him for not doing his job, and we lost the case in court. We lost the case in court because there is no justice, there is no common law. There's simply a corporate court. We did that to try to demonstrate to people that there is no justice. Well, where do you go to find remedy or relief or justice in a court system that doesn't exist? It's simply a corporation making money. That's my question. Any closing thoughts, Greg?
Yeah, no, that was a good wrap-up of the scenario, and that's exactly what we're looking at, is that we're dealing with corporate situations and not common law. Like you said, common law has been stolen from the people, and we need to return that to the people. And it was hopeful that our president was going to do that, or is in the process of doing that.
That's all we have is hope. Anyway, thank you for watching. I would encourage everybody to go to our Facebook page, Inform New Hampshire, and like it. And also on YouTube, check us out there and subscribe to that, if you would, please. Pass the show along to people. All we're trying to do is enlighten people about the massive, massive corruption that's going on in the United States of America. Just because it's subtle and you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you to Greg Fedor for being on the show today.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it, Greg.
much.